What's going on, everybody? So with the nerfs to Book of Thoth and Tablet of Destinies, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the differences between the original meta of going Sands of Time into Book of Thoth, and the other build of going into Conduit Gem and Chronos Pendant. Let's take a look at how much damage Book of Thoth does with the new changes. And you can see that with the nerf it gives 220 power, where before it would have given you 237.5 power because they reduced its base power by 10 and its mana scaling by 1%. So now with Book of Thoth with 0 stacks, you do 331 damage with Silas 2, where before the nerf you would have done roughly around 338 damage. And this doesn't seem like much until you have a full build together and the damage comes down drastically. With the full build where Book is fully stacked, you're doing around 850 damage with Silas 2, whereas before you'd be doing around 900 to 910 damage when calculating it from last patch, where it had 10 more power and 10% instead of 8% for its passive, which all things considered is pretty significant. Now let's take a look at Conduit Gem and Chronos Pendant difference when they are freshly bought in the early game. At no surprise, the Conduit Chronos build outdamages the Sands of Time book build by 48 damage, including the Conduit Gem proc. Now let's take a look at the difference right around when you buy your second item, and Book of Thoth has around 2/3 of the stacks done. And as you can see, Conduit and Chronos still outdamage it by a whole 32 damage. So even around the 10 to 12 minute mark, you're still outdamaging the Book of Thoth build. And then let's take a look at the difference when Book is fully stacked, around when you start buying your third item. And as you saw, it isn't until around the third item bought when Book is finally stacked that it does more damage than the Conduit Chronos start, and it's only by 19 damage. Also, keep in mind that these are just example build comparisons. Depending on your build, the damage output could change. And then finally, let's do a full build comparison without Tablet of Destinies, following similar builds. When excluding Tablet of Destinies, the damage seems to level out more, where the Book build does around 963 damage, where the Conduit Chronos build does 957 damage. However, if we add Tablet to the Book build, you can see that the late game damage outshines the Conduit Chronos build by 203 damage, which is still ridiculous. But since the gap in damage has become less significant between these two builds, you can still build into Conduit and Chronos and still do decent damage. And this is especially important on gods that don't utilize Tablet as well as other gods, because not only are you doing similar damage, but you need to keep in mind that your early game and rate in which you throw out your abilities will be superior to the Book and Tablet build until later in the game, where it usually outshines the Conduit Chronos build. So gods that don't easily stack Tablet like Yanis, Scylla, or Ra for example, will have a better time going Conduit Chronos build without suffering from lackluster damage output. But I still believe that Book of Thoth is still very good, especially on gods that utilize Tablet of Destinies really well, like Tiamat, Thoth, and Merlin. So at the end of the day, I think the nerfs sort of bridge the gap for damage output on mages when going the Conduit Chronos build, and you can still go into Tablet of Destinies with Chronos build and still do a decent amount of damage. As you can see, it does around 1105 damage, which is about 55 damage less than the Book and Tablet build. So this could be another option as well. One thing to note is that when building Chronos instead of Book, with this build you're losing out on flat pen that Book of Thoth gets when it evolves. This means you're either going to have to substitute it with either Divine Rune or Spear of Desolation to get some of that flat pen, or you're going to have to go without it. And I believe this flat pen is valued more in Conquest, as there are usually 3 squishy targets in the game at all times, whereas it will depend differently in Joust based on what team comp that they're running. For example, in Joust, if they're running a 2 frontline team versus 2 squishy team. Moving on to the different game modes, I believe the changes will definitely impact build optimization the most in Conquest, and this is because Book of Thoth and Tablet were the go-to build options 9 times out of 10 for most mages last patch. And this is due to how long Conquest is by default, which made it pretty secure that as a mage you're going to be doing crazy damage late game. But now, with the Conduit Chronos option, it's probably the case that this build will be the go-to option because of its early pressure and very good late game damage. But keep in mind that the two builds will be dependent on god choice. Now in terms of Joust, I think it'll have a bigger effect on what build path mages will go. I believe that Tablet of Destinies was a weird item to go in Joust due to Joust not being a secure game mode that goes late game. So a majority of the time, you never fully stack Tablet. So even before the nerf, there were only a few gods it was worth on. So now with the nerf to Book of Thoth and Tablet, I think the Conduit Chronos Start will probably be the go-to items for most mages, where Tablet and Book might be good on gods like Thoth or Tiamat, but that's pretty much it. So overall, I think that in Conquest, the builds will probably be Chronos and Conduit, but you will still see Book of Thoth and Tablet. But in Joust, I just don't see Thoth or Tablet being built as much. Now the final verdict on which one is better to go is not clear cut anymore, where before, buying Sands of Time and Book of Thoth was the only items to build. And I think this is a good change because it now makes more of the less picked mages have a better chance at doing more damage without Book and Tablet. Where now it depends on what god you choose and whether or not you want early pressure or late game damage output. However, I still don't think it was a big enough change and still think Tablet and or Book could still use a nerf. But I guess we'll have to see how the meta settles. But what do you guys think? Do you like this change, or do you think they should have done something else? Also, suggestions are welcome too. Other than that, thank you guys for watching.